Imagine paying a professional, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars to sell your home,
Yeah, which is an insane amount of money.
right? And you assume they're fighting tooth and nail for your bottom line,
Right.
but then you find out uh, they're actually trapped in this financial system
hmm
that mathematically forces them to work against you.
It is honestly a terrifying thought, especially since we are talking about, the largest financial transaction of your life.
Completely. And welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are super thrilled to have you joining us.
Yeah, glad you're here.
Today, we're exploring a pretty profoundly eye-opening document. It's called Your Move, Chester County and Beyond.
Put together by the SEER team.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically uncover the hidden financial traps within the real estate industry.
Mm.
We want to look at why this massive industry just, seemingly cannot evolve.
And how artificial intelligence is finally forcing the curtain to drop on all these outdated models.
Yeah, AI is the wild card here. Okay, let's unpack this. The core thesis here is just wild. It's not that these industry leaders are, philosophically opposed to a better, more efficient way of buying and selling houses for you.
Right. The SEER team document moves past those superficial complaints. The ones that agents are just inherently greedy or lazy.
Totally, you hear that all the time.
Exactly. But the source argues something much deeper. It's that they literally cannot embrace change without voluntarily dismantling the exact mechanisms that pay their mortgages today.
So they are basically locked inside a machine of their own making.
Precisely. The financial scaffolding of every major incumbent model essentially forbids evolution. If they change to better serve you, the consumer, they destroy their own revenue streams.
Wow. Okay, so where does this resistance actually start? Let's look at the most traditional, visible model out there, the big national franchise brokerages.
Right. The absolute bedrock of traditional real estate.
Yeah, the ones with the massive brick-and-mortar offices in every town square, the fancy glass conference rooms. The Force talks about something called the desk fee trap.
Yeah, let's break that down. These brokerages operate on a system requiring significant physical office space. They pay brand royalties up to a parent company, and they need a consistent agent headcount to cover their fixed overhead.
And that overhead is funded by the desk fee, right?
Exactly. The flat monthly amount an agent pays just to, hang their license at that office.
So I was reading this part of the source, and I couldn't help but think, is this basically like a predatory gym membership model?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Hear me out. The gym owner signs a massive commercial lease. They buy all these expensive treadmills. They have front desk staff to pay.
Right. Huge overhead.
So to cover that, they just need bodies paying those $20 monthly dues to keep the lights on. They don't actually care if those people ever work out. In real estate, the franchise owner just needs agents paying the desk fee, regardless of whether those agents actually sell houses or serve clients well.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism at play here. The desk fee isn't some grand business philosophy about fostering agent independence.
Right.
It is, strictly speaking, a debt service mechanism. These franchise owners have taken on massive financial obligations. All of that requires a predictable baseline number of agents paying into the system every single month just to break even.
So it's literally just about covering the spread.
Yeah, but what's fascinating here is how this structural trap ultimately impacts you, the consumer. Because an empty desk is so incredibly expensive for the franchise owner, their recruiting standards inevitably drop.
Oh, they just need bodies paying dues.
Exactly. The physical office basically exists to fund itself, not to support the agent's growth, and certainly not to provide high-level specialized service to the consumer.
Okay, so let's play this out. Let's say a highly productive, modern agent comes along and says, hey, I don't need this massive office. I can work remotely from my laptop. Let's use a leaner, more efficient model so I can pass savings on to my clients.
Yeah, or invest more in marketing their homes.
Right. But the franchise owner can't agree to that, can they?
They literally cannot afford to agree to it. Any industry shift toward a remote, low-overhead structure is an existential financial threat to the franchise owner personally.
Even if they philosophically agree it's a better model.
Exactly. They might look at a leaner model and completely agree it's better for everyone, but in practice, their commercial lease is still due on the first of the month.
Right, the landlord doesn't care about structural evolution.
And meanwhile, the parent brand sitting at the very top of the franchise food chain, they are just collecting royalties on gross commission income.
Wait, let's define that real quick for the listeners. Gross commission income, or GCI, is just the total top-line revenue generated before the brokerage and the agent split the money, right?
Correct. It's the total pie. And the parent company takes a slice of that massive pie across thousands of offices.
So their only incentive is sheer volume.
Exactly. More agents, more transactions, more royalty flow. They don't care about the efficiency of the local
They
office.
just want the gym to be as packed as possible.
Pretty much.
Okay, so the industry eventually recognized that physical buildings and fixed overhead were a trap. And as the source details, they tried to escape that trap by moving to a completely different model.
Right. What happens when a brokerage tries to eliminate the buildings and build its value entirely around the people?
Which brings us to the second trap, the profit share model,
This was supposed to be the great evolution. Brokerages built on agent profit share and recruiting downlines.
where agents earn passive income based on the sales of other agents they recruit. Wait, hold on. I want to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Because on the surface, profit sharing sounds amazing. It sounds like a utopian business model, right? Agent empowerment, community, building passive income so you aren't just grinding out transactions until you're 80.
It does sound incredibly alluring.
Why wouldn't we want agents sharing the wealth?
Yeah.
Why is the source calling this a trap?
Well, the dark side of that utopian vision is that it forms a pyramid that cannot shrink.
A pyramid that cannot
Yeah.
shrink.
Yeah. The promise made to these agents is build your downline, recruit your friends, and you will earn an income that outlasts your active career. But there is a massive hidden mathematical dependency built into that promise.
It requires infinite perpetual growth.
Exactly that. The model only works when the overall agent population is continually expanding. Every new recruit generates a sliver of production that flows upward through that tree.
Right, to the agents above them.
But let's look at what happens if the industry actually evolves and gets more efficient.
Right, like if we get real structural reform, the source mentions things like licensing changes or consumer direct tools making things so streamlined that we don't need 1.5 million part-time agents anymore.
Right. What if the industry naturally shrinks down to just a core group of full-time, highly trained professionals?
Oh, if the overall number of agents drops.
The pyramid collapses, and this isn't just a conceptual threat to the corporate brand. This threatens the literal retirement income of the top agents who spent decades building these specific downline trees.
So they literally cannot advocate for an industry with fewer highly trained professionals.
Because that would mean voluntarily taking an axe to their own passive income trees.
Wow. So what does that actually look like day to day for you, the client?
What it looks like is that recruiting never stops being the primary activity. Even for agents who genuinely want to focus entirely on serving you, the structural incentive pulls them constantly back toward recruitment.
Because the underlying math demands it.
Exactly, just to sustain the passive income promises made during their massive growth phases.
And the source makes a really fascinating point here. The people complaining about this trap aren't just like disgruntled outliers who failed to recruit anyone.
Not at all. The most vocal critics are often the highly successful agents who built significant downline trees.
Wait, really? The successful ones?
Yeah, because they watched their passive income flatten out or plummet as the broader real estate market contracted. They realized those aggressive financial projections made during a massive housing boom simply do not hold up when the market normalizes.
So they realize they are trapped in a model that financially forces them to focus on recruiting their peers rather than actually helping you, the listener, buy or sell a home.
Exactly.
So we've seen two failed escapes. The traditional franchise model is trapped by physical leases. The profit share model is trapped by this endless pyramid of human capital.
Right.
So surely the modern tech-forward brokerages have solved this, right? The ones raising billions of dollars in Silicon Valley.
You would certainly assume that a massive influx of venture capital would fix the structural issues. But that brings us to the third track, the platform model.
And the source uses Compass as the most visible example of this, right?
Yes, as a very instructive example of this specific financial architecture.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Compass raised massive amounts of capital by pitching themselves not as a traditional real estate brokerage, but as a technology platform.
Right, a tech company that just happens to employ real estate agents.
And to justify those massive tech valuations to their venture capital investors, they couldn't just rely on traditional commission splits.
Exactly. VCs don't fund traditional real estate models. They require something that all tech platforms fundamentally need: proprietary data, and a walled garden of inventory that their competitors cannot access.
And that leads to this strategy the source talked about called private exclusives. This is where a house is marketed internally only within the Compass network before it ever hits the open public market, the MLS. And I have to say, reading this, I kept thinking of an analogy. It's like hiring a stockbroker to sell your Apple shares for the absolute highest possible price.
Okay, I like where this is going.
But instead of taking those shares to the global open market, where thousands of buyers can bid the price up, your broker holds them back. They just go into the company break room and offer them to their own coworkers to see if anyone wants to buy them first.
Just so the brokerage can double dip on the fees.
Exactly. How does intentionally limiting the buyer pool help the seller get the highest price?
Well, according to independent research cited in the source, it usually doesn't. Broad market exposure reliably generates higher prices through competitive bidding.
Because obviously more buyers means a higher price. Putting a house on the public MLS is like putting that stock on the open exchange.
But from the platform's perspective, the business rationale for private exclusives is incredibly clear and necessary for their survival.
Because if they keep the inventory visible only to their own agents first, they get to accumulate proprietary data on buyer demand before the open market even knows the house exists.
Furthermore, it significantly increases the odds of an in-house transaction. And this brings up a critical industry term: dual agency conflicts.
Let's explain that.
This happens when the brokerage captures both the buyer's side and the seller's side of the transaction. If a brokerage represents the seller who wants the highest price and the buyer who wants the lowest price, their fiduciary loyalty is mathematically compromised.
You can't fight for the highest and lowest price at the same time.
Exactly. But financially, the brokerage keeps the entire commission pie.
Which creates a massive values conflict. And I want to be perfectly clear and impartial here, just as the source is. This isn't about calling anyone evil.
No, not at all. The tension is purely structural.
It's a tug of war between what the platform needs to justify its multi-billion-dollar valuation and the fundamental fiduciary duty owed to you, the seller.
Many agents joined Compass because they were promised cutting-edge technology and a culture of elite client service, but now they are feeling the friction.
Because they're being pressured to use private exclusives.
Right. They are structurally pressured to use a system that clearly benefits the brokerage's data capture, while having to look their sellers in the eye and say, keeping your home a secret from 90% of the market is actually the best thing for you.
It's a profound structural tension.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to watch how the rhetoric from Compass leadership has actually shifted as this tension has become more public.
Oh, absolutely.
The source points out that Compass CEO Robert Refkin used to rely on a purely data-driven argument. He would claim, our internal data shows our sellers actually get more money this way.
But as independent economists and researchers push back on that claim, because basic economics dictates that broad market exposure creates competition, which drives up price. Refkin's rhetoric escalated dramatically.
He shifted from a data argument to a legal one.
Exactly. Arguing recently that MLS mandates cannot supersede an agent's fiduciary duty to their client.
Wow. So when the math gets questioned, you just reframe the entire regulatory structure of the open market as the actual problem. That is quite a pivot.
It highlights the exact trap they built for themselves. The innovation dilemma is real here. If Compass abandons private exclusives to resolve this ethical friction with their agents and the broader market, they lose their proprietary edge.
They become just another normal brokerage feeding inventory to Zillow.
And their tech platform premium vanishes. Their investors would panic.
But if they keep the private exclusives, they risk regulatory backlash, consumer anger, and their own top agents defecting because they are exhausted by that values conflict.
They cannot retreat, and they cannot advance.
So we have three distinct failed escapes. The traditional franchise owner is trapped by their physical lease. The profit share agent is trapped by the need to feed their downline pyramid. And the tech platform is trapped by the venture capital need for proprietary inventory.
Which brings up a wildly chaotic scenario.
Right. With all three of these massive models financially trapped in entirely different competing ways, what happens when disruption hits the entire ecosystem all at once?
This is what the source calls the ecosystem problem, because these fundamentally conflicting models are all operating in the exact same market, sharing the same basic transaction structure. No reform is neutral.
Meaning a rule change that helps one mathematically hurts another.
Take the current industry debate around a rule called clear cooperation. This is a mandate requiring agents to put a new listing on the public MLS within 1 business day of marketing it.
Which, for a normal franchise agent, is fine. They want the listing public anyway, so it sells.
But for Compass, who wants to keep listings private to boost their own walled garden data pool, this rule is a direct existential threat to their business model.
On the flip side, commission transparency requirements impact a massive franchise model very differently than they impact a lean flat fee service.
So everyone is fighting for their own survival. Every major player in the industry is effectively lobbying for the specific version of structural reform that preserves their unique financial model.
But, and this is the truly cynical part, they're presenting their lobbying to the public using the vocabulary of consumer protection.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are watching a proxy war.
So when you read a headline about real estate companies fighting over new laws to protect buyers and sellers, it's actually just a proxy war for business model preservation.
Entirely. You are watching panicked franchise owners fight panicked tech platforms for survival.
And the consumer is just sitting in the middle of this crossfire.
Hearing every single corporate CEO claim to be their ultimate champion, with no reliable way to know whose advocacy is genuine unless they understand these underlying incentive structures.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, especially with AI entering the chat? Because let's be real, you're not just a passive observer watching this proxy war on the news. You are the one trying to buy or sell a house.
And this is where the landscape shifts permanently for the consumer. The real estate industry has survived huge disruption cycles before, right?
Yeah, they survived the physical MLS books going digital. They survived Zillow putting listing data right on the consumer's smartphone.
And they are currently trying to survive the recent massive buyer commission lawsuits.
And in every single one of those past disruptions, the industry's defense was exactly the same. Consumers still need our professional guidance to decipher this complex process, so our high-fee models are still justified.
And historically, that defense held up primarily because of one concept: information asymmetry.
Let's break that down.
That simply means the real estate agent had access to critical data, historical trends, and market nuances that you, the consumer, simply could not see.
Their value was wrapped up in being the gatekeeper. I know something you don't.
Exactly. But AI kills information asymmetry dead. It absolutely obliterates the gatekeeper era.
Wow, obliterates it.
The source details exactly what a consumer equipped with modern AI tools can do today. You no longer need to wait 3 days for an agent to pull a comparative market analysis.
Right, you can just sit at your kitchen table with your laptop, open an AI tool, and instantly model your net financial proceeds under dozens of different pricing scenarios.
You can research an agent's exact transaction history to see if they actually specialize in your neighborhood or if they are just faking it.
That is huge. You can have the AI break down complex commission structures and explain the legal realities of those dual agency conflicts we talked about before you ever even interview someone.
You can even use AI to instantly calculate local absorption rates. That's a technical industry term for how fast homes are selling.
So AI can just tell you, hey, 4-bedroom homes in this specific zip code currently take an average of 45 days to sell.
Yes. It can identify off-market dynamics and pricing pressure signals. The consumer already has the information.
So if you don't need an agent to be an information gatekeeper anymore, what do you actually need them for?
What you need from an agent now is pure judgment. You need fiduciary clarity. You need highly skilled execution and undivided loyalty.
But here's the fatal flaw for the incumbents, right?
Exactly. The models built around information asymmetry, the desk fee, the profit share at downline, the platform private inventory model, are structurally misaligned with a modern consumer who already has the data and is now demanding pure, unconflicted judgment.
Which brings us to the ultimate practical takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive right now. The source calls this the alignment question.
And it is the single most important question you must ask when you enter the real estate market.
Whose side is your agent on structurally?
This raises an important question. It's vital to frame it exactly as the source does. It is a structural question, not a personal one.
Right. When your agent sits across from you at your kitchen table and recommends a specific pricing strategy or tells you to delay putting your house on the open market, is that recommendation unconditionally the best possible financial outcome for you?
Or is it subtly, maybe even subconsciously shaped by what pays their massive franchise lease?
Or what feeds their passive income pyramid?
Or what fuels their tech platform's venture capital need for proprietary data?
We must reiterate this point. None of this is intentionally nefarious. Your agent isn't sitting there plotting to steal your money.
No, it is just structural misalignment. In fact, many excellent agents feel this exact friction daily.
Because they realize that what their brokerage model strictly requires them to do to survive is fundamentally at odds with what their client actually deserves.
It's that values conflict all over again. The industry is changing, AI is here, and the agents who will survive the next decade are the ones who break out of these traps and align themselves structurally with the consumer.
But this entire discussion leaves us with one final, frankly, mind-bending thought to mull over. We know AI can already pull your neighborhood's off-market dynamics at your kitchen table, right?
Right, it can model your pricing scenarios instantly.
But look, just a few years down the line, if AI eventually becomes capable of legally parsing, drafting, and aggressively negotiating the actual legalese of a real estate contract, with far more precision, lack of bias, and speed than any human ever could.
Where does that leave the human element?
Exactly. Will the real estate agent of the future even be considered a salesperson? Or will this massive structural shift force them to become something entirely different?
Like what?
Like, will they basically become specialized emotional therapists, guiding you through the immense psychological stress of moving your family and managing the largest financial transaction of your life, while the AI quietly handles all the math and the contracts in the background?
It fundamentally redefines the value proposition of a human being in the transaction. If the machine handles the data and the logic, the human is left only with trust, empathy, and undivided loyalty.
Something to think about the next time you see a for sale sign pop up in your neighborhood. Or, the next time someone offers to sell your Apple stock in the company break room. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into your move, Jester County and beyond. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking for structural alignment, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.